Okay, so our learning target in this particular unit is that we will be able to format text and ultimately also be able to align image. So the first part of this video is going to focus on formatting text, and then later on in this unit we'll be learning about the image alignment. So our learning targets for this video are that we can use logical and relative style tags to format text, and I'll explain what those vocabulary terms mean in a minute. And then the second piece of this, which will come after you watch this video, is that you'll be able to use image alignment to position text around image. So that's when we essentially wrap those words around a picture. So there are two types of tags that allow us to format text. The first is called a logical style tag. And you need to read these definitions very closely in order to distinguish how a logical style tag is different than a physical style tag. And what a logical style tag does is it allows the browser to use some interpretation. So it interprets the tag based on the default browser settings and then essentially applies that formatting relative to the other text on the page. So for example, you may have some writing on the page that is the default browser setting, and then you want something to be bolded. Well, what it will essentially do with a logical style tag is it will just make that one chunk appear to have a stronger text there. So it's not necessarily going to be bolded looking at the same level in every browser, but it essentially applies a bolded look to it relative to the text around it. So it depends on how the text around it looks, and based on that, that's how that bold may appear on the page. So logical style tags really use logic and interpretation. They look at what the browser settings are and then apply that tag relative to the other text on the page. A couple of examples of logical tags include the H2 tag, which we've already learned, and what it actually tells the browser is that that needs to be the largest heading size on the page relative to regular text and relative to other headings. The strong tag is one that we'll learn in just a second. Strong is very, very similar to boldface, but essentially it just gives text a strong appearance compared to that normal text. And then the emphasis tag, or the emphasize tag, looks like italics, and it essentially adds some emphasis to text relative to what's around it. So logical tags are all relative. It looks at what's already on the page and uses logic to apply that particular formatting compared to the rest of the text on the page. Now, physical tags, on the other hand, provide a particular font change regardless of what browser you're in. So for example, this B tag down here is very similar to the strong tag, but this is actually the boldface tag. And what will happen is no matter what the browser settings are, this tag is interpreted the same. It's not relative to the text around it. It doesn't take those browser default settings into account. It just says this is bold, make this chunk of text bold. So physical style tags look the same and are interpreted the same in all browsers, whereas logical style tags take into account the settings of the other text on the page. So now that we've talked a little bit about the two different types of tags we'll be using, let's just talk about formatted text in general. So why do we use formatted text? You've seen so far that making a plain website, we can do that. We didn't need to format our text in the first unit, but formatted text can really help us to draw attention to certain points of content on a page. So if you want something to pop out and be bold-faced, if you want something to be italicized and be an emphasis point in a statement, if you want something to be underlined, if you want something to be bigger, you can use formatted text to draw that attention without actually having to say, hey, look here at this. Formatted text kind of just does that for you, and it draws the eyes of the people viewing your web page. The one downfall, however, is that you can include too much formatting, and then that can just become distracting and difficult to read. We've all been on that web page where you get to that web page and there's 14 different colors, so many bolded words, and you don't really know what is actually important. So as you're creating web pages with formatting, just use your discretion and make sure that there is a purpose for every piece of text that you format on a page. So here's a list of the tags that you should have just experimented with. We're going to go through all of them really quickly. You can take the notes on these tags on your tag handout, but these are all different formatting tags that you can surround your text with for different purposes. So the first thing I want to hit on is that we have the bold and the strong tag. And remember, these both kind of have the same purpose, but their difference is that the B tag is a physical bold tag and the strong tag is a logical bolded tag. So remember that this one takes into account the browser settings, whereas the physical tag does not. And then the same thing happens with the I tag and the emphasis tag. So they both intend to make that font appear italicized, but the emphasis tag takes into account the relative part of this. So it's how does the other text appear on the page? I'm going to make this text emphasized relative to that text. And then the physical tag, remember, will always apply that italic. So just knowing the difference between the two, and that these two essentially have a very similar purpose as to those two. Okay, so here we have the next 4 tags. The big function, that big tag, basically does what you expect it to do. It increases the size of the font in relation to the surrounding text. So this is one that relates to the text around it, and what it does is anything with the big tags, it makes slightly bigger. And then kind of the opposite, if you use the small tags, it decreases the font size in relation to the surrounding text. So again, it looks at the surrounding text and it makes the text smaller. Then the block quote kind of designates a long quote. You've seen these in textbooks and in reading books before. It basically indents it in and makes it look like a blocked out quote. It's basically for a section of text that you want to stand out because it is a quote-like text. Kind of self-explanatory there. And then the U tag is how you underline text. So if you want something to be underlined, you surround it with the U tags. And here we have our final 3 tags. The first one, the sub, displays text as a subscript. So this is like what you'd see in chemistry when you'd see a little subscript below. So if we had like chlorine 4 or something where you have that number down below, that's known as a subscript. And then if you have a superscript, that's like in math when you have an exponent, and you can make that to uplift into that superscript. So you have subscript and superscript, which kind of work opposite of each other. And then the final tag is the TT tag, which displays text in a teletype monotype text. Just experiment with that tag a little bit so you know what that looks like. But those are the main formatting tags that you'll be expected to know for Unit 2.